The bell from the hotel elevator rang with that polished kind of sound, bright, practiced, like the place itself was trained to smile. The scent of cologne and lemon cleaner clung to the air, and beneath it all was something softer, the low murmur of a bar where people pretended to unwind after long conferences. That's where I was headed, just to kill an hour before checking in for my own overnight meeting. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not in that city, not that night. And that small coincidence, or maybe fate, was about to break 10 years of my life clean in half. My name's Evan, 36, married to Jenna for almost 8 years, together for 10. I used to think I could tell when she was lying. A small lift of her right eyebrow, that tiny delay before she'd answer. I used to think that meant I was safe. It started with a suitcase. That morning before she left, I noticed how carefully she folded everything. Not just work clothes, but the kind of dresses you wear to dinner, the kind that don't belong on a spreadsheet. She said she had a client training in Chicago, 2 nights, quick in and out. I kissed her at the door, told her to text when she landed. She did. A photo of the hotel room, a view of the skyline, nothing suspicious. But it was the coffee mug that did it. I saw it in the background of the photo. That same gray ceramic mug with the word Lakeview printed on it. My company booked its conferences there every fall. I knew that carpet pattern, those glass elevators, that specific skyline angle. And her Chicago client meeting? That wasn't in Chicago. It was 15 miles from my own regional office. At first, I told myself it was fine. Maybe her company used the same chain. Maybe she mixed up her locations. But the longer I stared, the more something in my chest tightened. So, on a gut impulse that I can't fully explain, I grabbed my jacket, called in a last-minute favor to a coworker, and drove through the rain to the one place I didn't want to be right. The hotel lobby looked the same as always. Polished, humming, impersonal. People wheeled luggage through with the same distracted rhythm. I remember standing just off the main desk, pretending to check my phone while the marble floor reflected every nervous tap of my shoe. That's when I saw her, Jenna. Not in her navy work blazer or the flat shoes she always wore for client days. She was laughing at the bar with someone, a man, leaning just close enough that the air between them didn't exist. He had a hand on the back of her chair. It was the kind of touch you don't mistake for friendly. I didn't go over. I didn't shout. I just stood there, my hand tightening around my phone like it might break in two. My ears buzzed, not from anger yet, just from disbelief. She had told me the trip was for work. And maybe it was. Just not the kind of work she'd mentioned. I left before they saw me. I don't even remember the drive back. Only the sound of the wipers, the city lights stretching like thin lies across the windshield. I parked 2 blocks from our house, sat there in the dark, and tried to understand what came next. I didn't confront her right away. Maybe that's what surprises people the most. But I'd spent enough of my life working in data analytics to know that one frame doesn't tell the story. You gather more before you act. So the next morning, I brewed her favorite coffee. Hazelnut, just like always. She came home around 8, said the flight was delayed, dropped her bag, kissed my cheek. I waited for the smell of his cologne on her clothes. Nothing. Maybe she'd been careful. Maybe I was the fool. How was the trip? I asked. She smiled, that same polite version that never reached her eyes anymore. Exhausting. You know how corporate travel is. I nodded, pretending to scroll through my phone. Didn't know they booked you at Lakeview. The cup froze halfway to her lips. What? Lakeview. The mug in the photo. We've stayed there for our conferences. She blinked, quick. Oh, right. No, this was in Chicago, too. Must be the same chain. Her tone was light. Too light. That's when I knew she'd rehearsed. I let it drop. For the moment, I needed more than a hunch. I needed something I couldn't unsee. Over the next few days, I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to. Her phone on silent more often. The late-night messages she said were from her boss, Daniel. And suddenly, that name, Daniel, started sticking in my head like a splinter. He'd come up before. A project manager she'd worked with for years. I'd met him once, at a holiday dinner. He'd shaken my hand like he was testing grip strength, smiled too long at Jenna when she laughed. That week, I found myself scrolling her company's website, looking for any trace of a joint conference. Something, anything, to make her story make sense. There was nothing in Chicago. But there was an event listing for Client Engagement Summit, Lakeview Hotel, Illinois. The same dates, the same hotel. But Daniel was listed as the lead presenter. I don't remember sleeping much after that. Friday night came with a sort of mechanical calm. She said she had another follow-up call and went upstairs. I watched her reflection on the staircase mirror, how she paused halfway to check her hair. I'd stopped being part of those little gestures. I waited until she closed the bedroom door, then opened the laptop she left on the counter. Her messages were still open. There it was. Daniel. Still thinking about last night? Jenna. Me too. Can't believe we risked it like that. The chat thread ended there. She must have deleted the rest. But that one exchange told me everything. I closed the laptop quietly and stared at my own reflection in the microwave door. People like to say that discovering an affair is an explosion, a scream, a slammed door, a plate shattered. But for me, it felt like sinking. Slow, cold, the kind of silence that fills every corner of the room until it becomes sound itself. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened, made pancakes, played music, hummed off key while the dog circled her feet. I sat across from her, wondering how long she'd been living this double life. I was thinking, I said finally, about visiting your office next week. Maybe take you to lunch. She hesitated, just a fraction, before saying, that'd be nice. But it was already too late. The following Wednesday, I showed up at her building around noon. She hadn't expected me. I told the receptionist I was her husband. He smiled and said she'd stepped out to lunch with Daniel. I thanked him and walked out. Not even anger then, just clarity. You ever feel like your whole marriage was a script someone else wrote? That's what it felt like. Every scene, every line, perfectly delivered until the one where you stop believing it. I didn't follow her that day. I didn't need to. I'd already seen enough once to know the truth doesn't get kinder the second time. Still, that night I sat in my car outside the hotel again. Not the same one, but close enough. Another Lakeview branch downtown. Same company, same scent of lemon polish. It was 10:30 when I saw her car pull in. She got out, glanced at her phone, waited near the side entrance. Then Daniel appeared. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. I stayed until they went inside. Then I drove home, packed a small overnight bag, and checked myself into that same hotel she'd lied about the first time. Room 419. And when the elevator doors opened again with that same bright chime, I realized something. Sometimes you walk into a lobby and find out what your life actually looks like. The first night alone at Lakeview was quiet in a way I didn't expect. The kind of quiet that makes you notice everything. The hum of the mini fridge, the slow pulse of the air vent, the faint echo of heels from the hallway outside. I lay there on the bed, staring at the ceiling, the room washed in that dull amber glow from the city outside. I wasn't there to spy on her again. At least that's what I told myself. I was there because I needed to know what I'd do if I stopped pretending. By morning, my reflection in the bathroom mirror looked older, like 10 years had passed overnight. The man who used to plan anniversary surprises was gone. What stared back was someone calculating, quiet, steady, in a way that frightened me. At 8:15, I got a message from Jenna. "Morning, babe. At work early. You doing okay?" I stared at the screen for a full minute before typing back, "Fine. Busy day. Might stay out of town tonight for a client dinner." Her reply came almost instantly. "Okay. Love you." I watched the words fade on the screen like smoke. The next few days, I lived two lives. In one, I was the same husband she'd always known, the one who cooked dinner, folded the laundry, asked about her meetings. In the other, I was building a quiet case, line by line, like tracking anomalies in a data set. I checked bank statements, small charges from restaurants I'd never heard of. Two from the same night she claimed she'd been working late, one from a wine bar near Lakeview. I went through her calendar while she showered. A new recurring meeting. Project Phoenix Sync. I Googled it. It didn't exist on her company's site. I took screenshots, saved receipts, cataloged everything. Not to punish her. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. But because I needed to know where I stopped existing in her life. By Friday, I'd rehearsed 100 versions of the confrontation, but none of them fit the way she smiled at me when she walked through the door that night. She brought Thai takeout, kissed my forehead like she still meant it. "Rough week," she said, dropping her purse on the counter. "Can we just not talk about work tonight?" "Sure, I said. We sat on the couch, a movie playing we didn't watch. Every so often, she'd glance at her phone, thumb hovering near the screen before pulling back. At one point, I reached out and took her hand. She looked up, startled. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just missed you." She smiled, leaned against my shoulder. For a moment, it felt almost normal, but I could feel the space between us, the one built on what she wasn't saying. Saturday morning, I told her I had a client meeting downtown. In truth, I drove to a small electronics store instead. Picked up a prepaid phone and a voice recorder. Nothing fancy. I wasn't planning to trap her. I just wanted a timeline. If she said she was working late, I'd check. If she said she was home alone, I'd know. I told myself that was rational, not obsessive. But the line between those two thinned fast. That night, around 9, she said she was heading to the office to prep for a Monday pitch. She left wearing her black blazer, the one she usually wore when she needed to look composed. I waited 15 minutes, then followed. Her office was dark when I arrived. No lights, no cars in the lot. Except one, Daniel's silver SUV, and parked beside it, Jenna's sedan. I didn't get out. Didn't need to. I sat there in my car, engine off, hands clenched on the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed to march inside, demand answers. But there's a moment, that fragile space between knowing and reacting, where your whole life can still take a different path. I stayed in that moment as long as I could. At 11:30, her car pulled out. I followed at a distance. She didn't go home. She drove to the Lakeview again. Same parking spot. Same lobby. I parked half a block away. Inside, through the glass doors, I saw them at the front desk, laughing with the receptionist like regular guests. She signed the check-in slip. Daniel's hand brushed her lower back. They headed toward the elevators. My chest felt hollow, but my body calm, almost mechanical. I walked to the side entrance, the one near the conference rooms, and waited. When the elevator pinged again, I looked up just in time to see their reflection in the mirrored doors, her hand in his. And that's when it happened. Not the anger, but the clarity. I wasn't losing her. I'd already lost her months ago. I didn't confront her that night. I drove back home, sat on the couch until dawn, the TV off, the room filled with that thin blue light of early morning. Around 6, The door unlocked. She crept in like a stranger, shoes in hand, steps careful on the tile. When she saw me sitting there, she froze. "Evan? Long night?" I asked. Her mouth opened, closed. There was a last-minute meeting." I stood slow. "At Lakeview?" Her breath hitched. "What? Don't, please. Just don't lie again." She looked like she might faint. "You followed me?" "I followed the truth," I said quietly. "It led straight to him." She started crying then, sharp, gasping sobs that might have meant regret or just fear of being caught. I couldn't tell anymore. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. "That's what people say when it's already been happening." Her shoulders shook. She sat down, covering her face. "I was lonely, Evan. You were always working, always somewhere else in your head. Daniel, he just listened." I wanted to laugh, not out of cruelty, just disbelief. "So you fixed loneliness by lying?" "I didn't plan it." "Neither did I said. But here we are." We didn't speak for a long time after that. The house turned into neutral territory. Polite exchanges, shared chores, no warmth. Every conversation was a transaction. I slept on the couch. She didn't protest. 2 weeks later, she suggested therapy. I said yes, but inside I knew it wasn't for me. It was for her conscience. At the first session, the counselor asked what we each wanted from it. "I want to rebuild," Jenna said, voice trembling. I said, "I want to know when it actually ended." The counselor looked between us like she'd stumbled into the middle of a crime scene. After the session, I walked out before Jenna finished signing the forms. Outside, the afternoon was bright and ordinary. Kids biking, sprinklers hissing across lawns. I stood there, letting the sunlight hit my face, and felt nothing. On the drive home, I passed the Lakeview again. I realized I could map my heartbreak by exits. The one where I first saw her, the one where I stopped believing, the one where I finally pulled off to breathe. That night, Jenna sat at the kitchen table, eyes red. "I know you don't believe me," she said, "but I ended it." I looked at her for a long moment. "Because you wanted to, or because you got caught?" She didn't answer. "I can forgive a lot of things, I said quietly, "but not lies that rewrite who we were." She whispered, "Then what happens now?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But I knew this. The next time I walked into that hotel lobby, it wouldn't be as the man she lied to. It would be as the man who finally decided what came next. For the next week, I stayed late at work. My coworkers thought I was chasing deadlines. In truth, I was just chasing distance. I started researching separation laws, property rights, mediation options, not out of vengeance, out of preparation. On Thursday, while clearing old files from my desk, I found the envelope from our honeymoon. Inside were ticket stubs, pressed flowers, a note she'd written in blue ink. "You make everywhere feel like home." I almost tore it up. Instead, I put it back. Some ghosts don't need burning. They fade on their own. Sunday morning, I packed a small bag again. Jenna watched from the doorway. "Where are you going?" she asked. "Out of town," I said, "for work." Her mouth quivered. She caught the echo. I paused, looked at her one last time. "Now you know how it feels." That night, I checked into a different Lakeview branch, one city over. I didn't have a plan beyond that, just space. The receptionist asked if I was in town for business or pleasure. "Neither," I said. "Something in between." When I reached my room, I left the lights off and stood by the window. Down below, couples walked hand in hand through the lobby. Somewhere, maybe, another version of me was still trusting, still naive. But this one, the man in room 512, was finally ready to let the truth settle in. The first week apart felt like holding my breath underwater. Every hour stretched out, the silence thick enough to hum in my ears. Jenna called twice, once to ask if I was safe, and once to ask if I was serious. Both times, I said I didn't know. I moved into a short-term apartment downtown, one of those furnished ones built for people between jobs or lives. The fridge was already stocked with tiny cartons of milk. The couch smelled like someone else's detergent. And the only sound at night was the traffic passing 3 stories below. It wasn't home, but it was honest. I worked late, stayed out longer, kept to myself. My coworkers noticed the dark circles under my eyes, but nobody asked. They all knew what silence looks like on a man. Every evening, I'd walk past the same corner coffee shop, white tile, brass fixtures, jazz humming low from old speakers, and watch couples sitting close across small tables. You start seeing patterns differently after betrayal. The way one person listens, while the other scrolls. How someone smiles too quickly after a question. It's all data. And you start to understand that love isn't just built on trust, but on the illusion that someone's paying attention. On the 6th night, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know what happened with Jenna. I think you should know something." At first, I thought it was spam, but when I replied, "Who is this?" the answer came back fast. "A coworker. Don't tell her you heard from me." My pulse quickened. I told myself not to respond, but I did. "Go on." It wasn't the first time. She's been meeting him during training trips for almost a year. Daniel bragged about it once. Thought nobody heard. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I asked for proof. The next morning, an email landed in my inbox, anonymous, with a forwarded message thread between Jenna and Daniel. Hotel bookings, calendar invites, photos of dinner receipts signed with both their initials. My first reaction wasn't rage. It was exhaustion. A year, an entire year of looking her in the eye and missing the signs. That evening, I sat by the window of my apartment, laptop open, cursor blinking on a blank page. I wrote a list, not of what she'd done, but of everything I'd ignored. Her networking dinners, the second phone charger she kept in her purse, the perfume that wasn't hers, the way she'd flinch when I said, "I love you," like she was guilty for still hearing it. I didn't finish the list. Some truths don't need to be tallied. They just need to be acknowledged. A week later, Jenna showed up at my office. She stood in the lobby, clutching her bag like a lifeline. My coworkers glanced between us with that polite awkwardness reserved for personal disasters. "Can we talk?" she asked. I wanted to say no, but I nodded. We stepped outside, the city wind sharp against our faces. "I'm not here to beg," she said. "I just want to explain." "Explain what? That you lied for a year?" She flinched. "It wasn't about you." "That's the problem," I said. "It never was." She looked up then, eyes rimmed red. "I made a mistake. A horrible one. But you're acting like I'm a stranger." "You became one," I said quietly. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. "If you can't forgive me, at least read this." I didn't take it. She pressed it into my hand anyway and walked away. Inside the envelope was a folded letter, her handwriting uneven. "Evan, I don't expect you to understand. I didn't plan it. I was lost, lonely, and stupid. But he isn't what I want. You are. I just didn't know how to be honest once I started lying. Please, don't let this be the last thing between us." The paper smelled faintly like her perfume. Familiar, painful. I folded it, placed it back in the envelope, and set it on my desk. I didn't open it again. The next few weeks passed in fragments. Work, sleep, nothing in between. I deleted her contact from my phone, but her number still lived in muscle memory. I'd catch myself typing it halfway before stopping. One evening, I walked past the Lakeview again. For the first time, I didn't look away. Through the glass, I saw the same bar, The same soft light. The same people pretending their lives were fine. I walked in. The bartender recognized me from months before. Back in town for the conference? Something like that. I sat at the same stool she'd once occupied, ordered a whiskey, and stared at the empty seat beside me. The glass left a small ring of condensation on the bar. Funny how the smallest traces are the hardest to erase. Later that night, I checked my voicemail. There was one message from an unknown number, Daniel. He didn't sound smug, just weary. Evan, look, I know you hate me, and you should, but you deserve to know. She ended it, weeks ago. She's been trying to fix things, but she doesn't know how. I'm sorry, man. I deleted the message halfway through. Apologies from strangers don't mean much when the person you loved made them necessary. By spring, Jenna filed for a trial separation. I didn't contest it. We met once more at mediation. She wore gray, hair tied back, hands clasped like she was holding herself together. I wore the suit I'd bought for our wedding rehearsal dinner. It still fit, physically at least. The mediator spoke softly about rebuilding trust and shared assets. I answered what I had to, nothing more. When it ended, she waited for me by the exit. "Do you hate me?" she asked. "No," I said, "but I can't recognize the woman I married." She nodded, tears brimming. "Then maybe that's punishment enough." She walked away before I could answer. Weeks later, a mutual friend told me she'd left her job, moved to her sister's place in Oregon, started over. I thought I'd feel relief. Instead, I just felt distance, the kind that isn't measured in miles, but in versions of yourself you'll never be again. I went back to Lakeview one last time, not to chase ghosts, but to close the loop. The same doorman nodded as I passed, the same scent of lemon polish in the air. I took the elevator up, stood in the lobby balcony, and watched the light fade through the glass walls. It wasn't anger anymore. It wasn't grief. It was something quieter. Acceptance, maybe. The understanding that some lies don't break you, they just redraw the borders of who you are. When I finally left, the sky outside was streaked with orange and blue. I walked until the lights of the hotel disappeared behind me, until the city noise swallowed the echo of what used to be my life. That night, back in my apartment, I deleted every trace of her. Photos, messages, old playlists. But I kept one thing. The note she left years ago. The one that said, "You make everywhere feel like home." Not because it was true anymore, but because it reminded me that once it had been. And that was enough to start again. There's a moment after heartbreak when everything goes eerily still, like the world exhales for you because you've forgotten how. That's where I lived for a while, between half-packed boxes and muted mornings, between used to be and not yet. Months passed. I started running again, eating real meals, filling silence with podcasts that didn't talk about love or loss. My coworkers said I looked better. I wasn't sure what they meant. Maybe that I looked less like someone waiting for something that wasn't coming back. Still, every so often, I'd catch myself scrolling through old photos, weekend trips, birthdays, her smile angled toward me. It wasn't masochism. It was documentation. Proof that it had once been real. In June, my boss assigned me to a client project. 3 days at, of all places, the Lakeview downtown branch. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Want me to send someone else beside down?" he asked. I thought about it for a long moment. No, I can handle it. So weeks later, I found myself walking through those same revolving doors again, this time with a briefcase instead of a broken heart. The lobby hadn't changed. The same marble floors, the same overbright lights, even the faint trace of that lemon scent I'd come to associate with endings. But this time, I wasn't there for her. I was there for me. The first night, After the meetings ended, I sat at the bar alone, ordered a club soda instead of whiskey. The bartender, a new guy, didn't recognize me. Good. Halfway through my drink, someone slid onto the stool beside me. A woman in a navy blazer, conference badge still clipped to her collar. "Rough day?" she asked. I smiled, polite. "Something like that." She laughed lightly. "You don't look like the small talk type." "I'm not. Guess you caught me on an off night." We talked for an hour about work, travel, the kind of surface level things that don't hurt. Her name was Claire. Divorced, marketing executive, quick sense of humor. When she got up to leave, she said, "If you're still around tomorrow, coffee's on me." I nodded. "I'll hold you to that." That night, back in my room, I couldn't sleep. Not because of guilt, there was none left to give, but because for the first time in a long while, someone had looked at me like I wasn't broken. It felt strange, dangerous even, like walking barefoot after months in boots. I didn't text Jenna. I didn't even think about it until morning when I saw her name pop up on my phone. "I heard about your conference. At Lakeview again?" I hesitated before replying. "Yeah, just work this time." "I hope it goes well." "It already is." I didn't realize until later how much that small exchange closed a door I'd been leaving cracked, open. The next day, Claire and I grabbed coffee between sessions. Nothing romantic, just easy conversation, a kind of companionship that didn't demand explanation. She mentioned she was moving to Boston for a new job. "Fresh start," she said. "Feels like I've been living in parentheses lately." I smiled. "Yeah, I know that feeling." She tilted her head. "Then maybe we're both finally writing new sentences." It wasn't flirtation. It was recognition. Two people who'd both been rewritten by betrayal and were finally learning to pick up the pen themselves. After the conference ended, I drove home under a sky heavy with summer rain. The city lights blurred across the windshield, and somewhere between one exit and the next, I realized I wasn't thinking about her anymore. Not Jenna, not Daniel, not the hotel lobby that used to hold my anger. I was thinking about myself, about the version of me that still believed in rebuilding, even after everything. That weekend, I went back to the house Jenna and I used to share. The realtor had left the key under the mat. We were finalizing the sale the following week. The air inside was stale, like time had stopped. Her perfume still lingered faintly on the closet shelves. I walked from room to room, not as a mourner, but as someone cataloging the past. In the kitchen drawer, I found a small box I'd forgotten existed. Inside was our wedding USB, photos, videos, the usual. I plugged it into my laptop. The screen lit up with frozen smiles, champagne glasses mid-clink, a younger version of me kissing a woman who no longer existed. For a second, I almost deleted everything, but instead, I renamed the folder, Once. It felt right. 3 days later, Jenna called again. Her voice was steadier than I expected. "I just wanted to say I'm signing the last of the papers tomorrow. You'll get your copy soon." "Thanks," I said. Pause. "You seem better," she added. "I am." She hesitated. "I'm glad. I really am." "I know," I said. "Take care, Jenna." It wasn't forgiveness, but it was closure. Months later, I got an email from Claire. Just a simple note. "Boston's colder than I thought, but it's a good kind of cold. Hope you're doing okay." I smiled, hit reply. "I am, and thanks for reminding me what okay looks like." That night, I walked past the lake behind my apartment. The air sharp, the water still. The reflection of city lights shimmered on the surface, like tiny promises refusing to drown. I realized something then. Sometimes healing doesn't announce itself. It just happens quietly, in the space where pain used to echo. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need an apology. I just needed peace, and I had finally earned it. Still, part of me knew the story wasn't quite finished. Not until I faced the last thing left unsaid, the one thing Jenna never explained, and the one question I'd never dared to ask. Because sometimes, closure doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from finding out what you were never meant to know. It was late autumn by the time I decided to meet her again. The air had turned sharp and clean, that kind of cold that makes breath visible and memories heavier. The divorce papers were already filed, processed, done. But something inside me wouldn't let go of the question that kept looping back every time I tried to move forward. Why him? Not out of jealousy, not even from anger anymore, but because without understanding that, the story never quite ended. So one afternoon, I sent her a message. Me, coffee, one time, just to close it right. She didn't reply for a full day. Then, Jenna, okay, tomorrow. Same place as before? I didn't know what before even meant anymore, but I said yes. The cafe was the same one we used to stop at on Sunday mornings. Tiny wooden tables, chalkboard menu, quiet music. I got there first. She walked in a few minutes later, wearing a coat I didn't recognize, hair shorter now. Time had rewritten her too. She smiled. Small, cautious. You look different. Better or worse? Wiser, she said softly. We sat, 2 cups between us. Silence doing most of the talking. Finally I said, "You don't owe me answers, but I'd like one anyway." She knew what I meant. She always had. I didn't plan to fall for him, she said after a while. But it felt like escape from everything I didn't want to admit. I was angry at you, at myself, at how routine everything had become. He made me feel seen. I nodded slowly. And you didn't think I could? Her eyes flickered. You were always there, but somewhere along the way, we stopped meeting in the middle. I took a breath. You could have told me. I know. I was a coward. She wiped a tear with the back of her hand. You were good to me, Evan. I don't think I ever told you that enough. You did, I said. Just not when it mattered. The silence that followed wasn't bitter, just honest. We talked for another hour, about nothing that would change the past, but everything that made sense of it. About how two good people can still fail each other in ways that don't look like monsters, just mistakes that grew roots. When we finally stood to leave, she said, I hope you find someone who listens better than I did. I hope you find someone who tells the truth sooner than you did, I said. She nodded, half smiling through the tears. Fair. Then she walked away, not as the woman who betrayed me, but as someone I once loved who was finally human again. That night, back in my apartment, I poured a drink and stared out at the city. The skyline blinked through the glass, soft and indifferent. I thought about how many versions of me had stood in different hotel lobbies, waiting for the truth to arrive. One hopeful, one broken, one healing. And I realized something. I didn't need the old version of us to come back. I just needed to remember that I'd survived it. A few weeks later, I got an email from Claire. Heading home for the holidays. Thought you'd appreciate this view. Attached was a photo of the Boston Harbor at sunrise. For the first time in a long while, I smiled without weight. I replied, Looks peaceful. Guess we both found our own kind of home. I never saw Jenna again after that coffee. She moved out west permanently, started over. I sold the house, kept the dog, learned to live without checking someone else's schedule before planning my own. Sometimes, late at night, I still dream of that hotel lobby, the shine of the marble, the echo of laughter, the hum of a moment breaking. But in those dreams now, I'm not frozen. I walk right past the bar, through the glass doors, and keep going. Because closure isn't something you're given. It's something you decide. And I decided finally to let the truth stay where it belonged, behind me. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.